Welcome everybody to the long and short of it with the Nicks. Hello, hello. And
Hello.
our special guest, Marc Finance, also known as Marc Orchard, who is a virtual CFO for high-tech growth companies and our personal friend and finance advisor. Thank you, Marc, for coming on to our episode today.
Hey,
Thank you, Nick.
Mark.
Yeah, how can I say no? Like it's like the first guest invitation. Impossible to say no to.
I know. And special guest because, sponsored by the Lou Wow, or not sponsored, I think who's counting. It's pretty cool because,
This way,
Nicole, do you
this
want to
way.
share the secret?
Yeah, I mean, you've been here before, haven't you? Last time we were at the luau together, we were busy giving each other feedback showers, which is very comfortably lots of fun for you, Mark, wasn't it?
As someone who's in finance, it was very HR/people orientated. But no, look, I enjoyed it. It was lovely getting feedback from you both about all the things that I do well, even if, I was struggling immensely with taking such compliments.
It was really
Fun.
fun. And I think it made us realize that one of the greatest things about you, Mark, is that you shouldn't work in finance. You're too much of a people person, which is why you're here
That's
right
why.
now.
That's why we're bringing the worlds together today, Nick. We're helping HR people embrace their numbers, and we're helping numbers people talk to people.
I love it. So maybe, let's start there.
Mm.
Finance people, I love them. You're great.
Mhm.
But sometimes it's hard for us people to like relate, get things we want, i.e. budget. I'm curious. What are some thoughts through the finance brain and maybe some tips for people who want to partner better with their finance?
Got you. So, on behalf of finance, I'd like to apologize for not always the easiest of functions to approach, particularly with that warm, positive vibe that HR typically has. And so, thank you for your patience. We appreciate it. But look, like finance is a tricky function, right? Because ultimately, we deal mostly with numbers, mostly with policy, and in a lot of companies, like finance is kind of like the back end function, kind of like the reporting function. We're a lag function. And I guess what I'm passionate about, trying to bring finance a little bit more into the lead function process of performance and management, and trying to inspire the rest of the organization to use numbers and data and metrics to be able to have a better functioning business, but ultimately to make everybody more excited with the possibilities of their company. And so, a couple of things, Nick, I think on behalf of Team Finance, here's some things that the finance team wish that the people knew, just to make that a little bit easier. And the first is that
Right.
you can influence the numbers on the P&L and very much impact the cash flow and the profitability of the business, because you typically work with the most important capital in the business, which is our human capital, right? And so for most startups and scale ups, the most expensive part of the business is our people. And so
Mhm.
it's really fascinating. I've got a friend, his name's Dan Shack. He's the CFO at Finder, but previously worked at Zero. And one of his things was it's really important to teach, like, not just HR, but the people in the organization how the company makes money and how their role fits into that. And one of the things that I found is that for most people, money is a emotional conversation before it is a logistical conversation. And so, one of the things that I took from Dan is that the more commercially minded or commercially savvy the people in the business are, the better the outcomes typically. And a lot of that starts with HR. And I guess that kind of comes into my second tip. And the thing that I want you guys to both take away with your is that if you can make your decisions cost neutral, like you can almost do anything. Like realistic with finance, our biggest concern is that you're going to spend all the money, and HR loves spending money on making experiences and finding people and doing and so like if you come to us and you say, hey, we've found a way to try and make this either cost neutral or like work within the budgets you've given us, like that, it's like HR has it at hello at that point.
I
And I
like
guess the last tip I want to give to you both is that a lot of the time finance is a little bit like parents. It's a bit like you try not to tell them things because by the time they get to them, it's like if you kind of ask for permission, you don't always get it, and so you ask for forgiveness instead. I'd like to encourage or inspire the people to make financial co-conspirators by making it like I guess like like approaching us with the outcome that you're trying to achieve and giving us permission to buy in a little bit, because you'd be surprised how much easier it is to get like budgets across the line or additional costing if the finance team can understand the importance of it. And so one of the things I do find is that HR leaders who understand numbers and can talk like, basic metrics, basic P&L balance sheets, like cash flow statement, like vocab. If you've got a basic understanding of that, you can talk to the finance team. You'd be surprised how much you can get away with as long as you can show that you're being commercially minded. And so in my head, that's what we wish that the people knew, was that if you can be commercially minded, you actually get your way a lot more than you realize.
I love that. So if we all go in chat GPT and say, what are the common finance terms we need to know? I think we should have what we need.
Just say things like return on investment, like, like revenue per employee, like, EBITDA, throw that in there somewhere. I'm sure that'll be a good start. But like, all jokes aside, like one of the things that sometimes with startups in particular, or scale ups in that tech space, is because you're so far away from the customer, you don't always get to actually see the transaction happen. A lot of product teams or a lot of operational teams just forget that there's actually transactions occurring that we need to maximize for. And so from a commercial point of view, Nic and Nic, I would love for you guys to champion with your HR crew that the more commercially savvy you are, the better chance you have of having good outcomes for the people on the teams. So let's advocate for that together.
Yeah, love that. And then the other big takeaway for me was cost neutral, budget neutral. So if you can show you're doing trade-offs and you're working within it, win it. As to how to get it initially, I'm going to save that for another day, because I feel like that can be a rabbit hole. But if you're actually commercially minded, then it's a good thing. Thank you so much. So another fun fact about Marc in finance is that before you were doing CFO work, you were actually advising people on like setting up their financial futures and more lifestyle planning. I love that. And you have done numerous, you don't really know it, but over breakfast, like coaching sessions.
That is true. I thought I was having eggs on toast, and you are actually mining me for like life information.
Yeah. So how many bank accounts do I need to have? Yeah. So I thought, why not bring this to the broader audience, which is, we hear about the barefoot investor on a personal front, or what to do in a business in terms of how many bank accounts and how to manage cash flow. I would love the Marc Orchard stance on this, whether you're setting up a side hustle, trying to think about your lifestyle budgets, like what are some like go-to foolproof methods for people who aren't financially inclined or see themselves as savvy in this space?
Yeah, got you. I mean, I think you're pretty savvy, Nic and Nic. Like, you guys have done a pretty good job. I've seen you guys in action. You go okay. But I guess like over having spent the first part of my career as a financial planner working with people working on their financial goals, and then the second half of my career working in, I guess, finance more broadly with high growth tech companies, like one of the things that you see in common is that those who have more cash have more opportunities. And so whether that is at a personal point of view, like you trying to figure out how you put yourself in a personally financially strong position, or whether that's in a company setting where we're trying to figure out like how much we want to burn or how much we want to grow or when do we want to get to profitability. What I found is that the companies and the people who are able to get more cash into their system, like the better chance of them being able to hit their goals. And so when it comes to personal finances, like I typically like to work with a 4 bank account, basic cash flow management strategy, Nic. And one of those bank accounts should certainly be like just an income account, the money that just comes in. And the reason for that is that what we find both in a personal and professional setting is that most people overcount the amount of money that they make and they underestimate the amount of money that they spend. And so if you do have one account that simply comes in as the kind of like the top of funnel that then disperses the money through, it's really easy to be able to see how much money is coming in on a personal point of view. That then comes into, I like to have a working capital account, which is where most of your expenses kind of come through. Now, I personally have split that into 2, but like we have one working capital account where most of your expenses go through. And the idea of that is to be able to track, like, what is the amount of money that you actually have available to do your day-to-day or your meaningful, I guess, business as usual activity. If this is a small business, this is the money that you use to be able to pay suppliers or to pay outgoings. If this is in a personal setting, this is how much you've got to live with your household. At the moment, it's tricky. Cost of living pressure is tricky, but realistically, your goal is to try and make that working capital less than 50% of your overall income if possible. And then we break out into, I guess, 2 more bank accounts. Ideally, you're going to have 4. And the other 2 are going to be, one is a savings account or something that kind of like starts or triggers like, future investments into assets and so forth. And in a business setting, that could be more people, that could be on projects or on things that need to be bought inside the business. For you as a human, that could be for a potential investment strategy, or that could be for holidays or things that you want to put money aside for. And then lastly is an obligations account. So what we find is a lot of people who don't separate out their tax or their obligations get themselves into trouble because they underestimate how much tax or obligations that they were expecting to have. And so if you're in a business setting, I always make sure that you take away your GST or take away any of your PAYG or any super payments that you're obligated to make and put that into a separate account. So you're never going to spend it. But from a personal point of view, if we're just looking at a personal, like sometimes you will have things that you know that you're coming up that you need to pay for, that if you put that money aside, it makes it a little bit easier to manage. Now, it sounds so simple, and I promise you it is, but at the same time, I've seen a pretty significant impact on people who've used a version of this. And so that's typically what I give. And Nick, I think we had conversations over breakfast. I hope that helped you to kind of manage your business in the short term. But from my point of view, I think the more cash that you can capture in that system, and that you can see from a benchmark point of view, if 50% of your money is going into business as usual, if like 10 to 20% is going into obligations, and the rest of that money is going into potential investment or future Nick money, then realistically, that's a pretty good start.
I love that. Thank you. And it's, I feel like a really good build upon, I think my first question, which was like, what percentage of tax am I going to owe? I don't want to end up with a big bill. And thank you for that. Cause yeah, tax just happened and whew, there was money in the bank.
It's tax is never fun. Even finance doesn't like tax, Nick. So like less, like I can understand.
Yeah. I like, fire stations and schools. And so I understand why it's important, but it's still tough. So. All right. Well, let's go on to your crystal ball. This is like we're just making this up on the fly here. But as our first guest, you have a crystal ball. You track the market, given what you do. There's probably, hopefully, one of our many subscribers is a founder listening in on this. But in the event they are,
yeah.
What guidance would you give to founders right now who are looking at a cap raise and the trends you're seeing, what you anticipate happening over the next few months?
Got you. So I did a LinkedIn post on this a little while ago that got a little bit of traction, and ultimately, like 2024 has been a funny market. And I guess what I mean by that is that at the top end of the funnel, most of the valuations and the liquidity in the market really drops down from the IPO / the broader share equities market, right? And so because like tech holistically has, even though the share markets are going well, the tech markets, we've struggled to be able to get many of the big companies away, like the Stripes or the Canvas and Co, into like IPOs, which would have liquidated like investment holdings, which kind of then trickles down into the GPs, like the VCs that we know, the people who actually the operational partners there are struggling to get their LPs like returns in cash, which then dries up, I guess, a little bit in the short term, like the amount of money that's going into the broader startup and scale up ecosystem. What I'm seeing is that there are still deals being done, but ultimately they're bigger deals and there's less deals. And so what seems to be happening is that like if a VC feels like they've found a winner, they're looking to really back those companies, but they're not looking to try and spread their bets nearly as much, which just means in 2024, raising capital has been really tricky. But in my head, there's some things that are coming up that are possibly going to change that around a little bit. So we have the US election, we have like interest rates, which in the US in particular seem to be on the point of potentially coming down slightly. Like as soon as interest rates start to come down, like more globally, you'd imagine that there's going to be more liquidity in the system, which is going to give like more opportunity for growth funding to come in for startups. And so what we're kind of telling our clients at the moment is that at the moment in 2024, early 2025, only fundraise if you have to, if it's mission critical, if you can't get to the next milestone without additional capital, and just expect, I guess, that the terms aren't going to always be fantastic, but ultimately it's not quite as dire as it was at the back end of 2022-23, where a lot of the investments stopped. But certainly the terms are tricky and the valuations aren't great. But on the back end of 2025, hopefully into 26 through to 2028, like I think there's going to be a really good window there for founders based on the fact that if the tech companies can go public, there's more liquidity in the system, and then there's more growth across the tech ecosystem more broadly. I think that there'll be some great opportunities for merger acquisitions, for Series A, B, and C funding and onwards, and then hopefully long term, that'll just lead to more startups being started and scaled. And so in the short term, it's not a crisis, but it's certainly a tricky market. And my goal, I guess, is for founders is to take, like, I think one of the misconceptions is that like your startup works in a vacuum, like your valuation is based on what you're achieving and so forth. Like oftentimes that's actually more dictated by the market. And so if we're thinking about windows, like in 18 months time, I think that like all the companies who have survived through this stage will hopefully be ready to capital and for scale on the back end with a really lean cost structure. And hopefully that's going to mean that there's a ton of activity and high growth billion-dollar S-type companies in the not too distant future. Nick, what do you think? Does that sound okay to you?
I sure hope so. I think that's great. That's a good crystal ball.
I look forward to that aging badly.
We're going to come back to this recording in 12 months.
That's right. I'll be the Scott Galloway of Australia, where it's like all that either really happened or really didn't.
I love it. You are so knowledgeable in this space. And even in 15 minutes, I think, anyone listening is going to be taking some pretty great nuggets away. So thank you so much for being our first ever Luau guest at the Long and Short.
Go Team Finance.
Yeah, go Team Finance. Before you go, tell us a fun fact.
A fun fact. Okay, so look, I have two small children. They make me fun, which is always like entertaining. And Nick, you already know a lot about that. But probably the fun fact that I pull out at parties was that I studied abroad in 2008. And in 2008, 2009, and I was at Obama's inauguration, and I was like the tallest person in our little space. And so we're watching Obama and all these like famous people on stage. It was wonderful. This poor African-American lady who was standing right behind me was frustrated because I'm 6'5". I understand. When she realized I was Australian, she was like, oh, hell no, he's not even from here. And it was hilarious. And so, yes, there's some poor African-American lady out there that her story of Obama's inauguration was that she had to stand behind some poor, stupid Australian that was way too tall for the group.
Did you wear your Jordans to the inauguration?
Oh, I would have, like, realistically. I'm a simple man, Nick. Yeah. So, yes, I would have had my Air Force Ones on most likely.
I love it. It's a great fact.
I don't know what that's like, blocking people's views. So thanks for sharing the story.
That's okay.
Live vicariously through you guys.
You can stand on a chair next to me, Nick, one day and we'll be great.
I mean, we've done that before for photos.
True.
That is true.
We're all the same height at the luau. That's all that matters.
Yes.
That is all true.
Love it.
All right. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.